Gary, this whole conversation should be on the ice, but it's there's stuff off the ice going on. Bill Daly was quoted the other day in a report saying that cocaine positives are up in the league. I'm reading the headline of this article. I think it's a New York Post that says the NHL says it has a cocaine problem.
Well, I think the headline is worse than the article. I think that there's some usage. It's not representative of overwhelming number of our players, and we're in a dialogue with the Players Association to address it. People talk about recreational drugs. I hate that term because drugs are not intended to be recreational. I think to the extent we need to be doing more on education, more on counseling, and more on testing that to deal with what appears to be a small issue and growing. We want to get rid of the growing, and we want to get rid of the issue altogether, and that's something we need to do jointly with the players.
So for the listeners, you guys have drug testing. You do test for cocaine, but you're not allowed to bring that back to the player.
There are drugs that the players are held accountable for and can result in being in our program and potentially discipline, but that relates more to performance-enhancing drugs than the so-called recreational drugs. What we're learning is based on what we call survey testing, generalized, what are the trends out there, and in certain instances where there's a level of something that concerns the counselors, they can intervene and put somebody in the program. We want to talk to the players about being much more comprehensive in dealing with any drug use, whether or not it's performance enhancing or so-called recreational, or even something that's legal like alcohol if overly consumed.
So specifically, which players have tested for cocaine in your office?
No, we don't.
You don't.
No, if there were an alarming level, like life-threatening, the counselors would be able to find out and intervene. But we don't know because it's not part of the program per se.
Okay. But
and that's, by the way, and the program, we don't have the unilateral right to do things here. We need the consent and agreement of the Players Association.
Now, but would you agree that really if there is an increased problem, which I suspect there is, and
well, we're dealing with a population of young men who are extraordinarily wealthy.
Sure.
It's a societal issue, but that doesn't mean that we can't, working with the Players Association, address it head on.
The question is, education is one thing, but the true way of getting rid of it is to have it in there with the other testing and make it. Well, that's the only way to get rid of it. I mean, the education is great. But if you really want to stamp it.
Well, but the issue is, and at your age and my age, Doug, we tend to be a little old school, but I try to be a little more enlightened on the subject.
Yeah.
It's not about punishment. It's about making sure we get it to stop.
Totally.
And the best way to get it to stop is to make clear that it's not good to do. And if you're not doing it, you shouldn't do it. And if you are doing it, you should stop. And if you need intervention and you need help because you're doing it too much, the program should do that. My interest is not to go around punishing people. My interest is getting players to understand the consequences of doing something that could jeopardize this great once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that they've been given, that is to play in the NHL.
Okay, so you're talking to the Players Association. How do you do that now? How do you convince the players that we're looking after your best interest? We want you healthy. We don't want you to jeopardize not only your career and your life, but if I'm a player, I'm sitting there going, well, if Gary finds out, I'm done. My career's over. So how do you do that?
By the way, and if Gary doesn't find out and somebody arrests you, or if somebody doesn't find out but you're using drugs that cause you to go off the rails and not be able to compete at the highest level, you've jeopardized your career. So the answer is you have to, and this is part of the education, and it's a discussion that Don and I have to have, and Don needs to talk to the players because obviously that's what the PA does, and we're not in a position to do. But, actually, if you read a lot of the clips that have come out of the last couple of days from this, there are a lot of quotes from players who think it's a good idea for us to collectively deal with this head on.